episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show with another fascinating guest helping to make a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today we have the honor of being joined by Kate Abate, who is an International Federation of Bodybuilding and Fitness pro bodybuilder and Olympian. She's also a nutrition and fitness coach that specializes in holistic wellness. Kate has over 10 years of coaching experience and has worked as a health consultant, as a fitness instructor, a writer within the health and fitness realm, and her certifications include a certified personal trainer, registered yoga teacher, certified bioprint body composition practitioner. She's qualified in total resistant exercise instruction, certified barreworks instructor, and certified group fitness instructor. And her firm is known as Abate Infinities. In addition to all of that, Kate holds a bachelor's degree in politics and international relations with a minor in economics from Scripps College, but extremely interesting to the theme we talk a lot about in the show. She's currently pursuing a master's degree at University of Southern California, Leonard School of Gerontology, where she's currently studying aging, longevity, and health span. In addition to all of that, she currently volunteers as a certified crisis counselor for the RAIN organization, which stands for Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which is one of the largest national sexual assault hotlines in the United States. Kate Abate, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ira.
I'm really glad we could get together and talk for a little while today. I'd love to start off, as typically do, just by handing you the floor for a little bit, just to talk about yourself a little bit. If you could take us back from everything from sort of where you grew up, when you first got interested in health and in fitness, and when you started competing in the sport of competitive bodybuilding. And I understand, you have a whole story as well about sort of personal health challenges that led up to that. So if you could walk us through that for several minutes, I think that'd be a great way to start everything off we're going to be talking about.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity again. I really appreciate it. I've always been a very active person. As an infant, I was told that I never crawled, I just ran. So I had that. And then in tandem, my first memory was actually when I was 3. I had a cyst around my thymus. And I had to have that removed at age 3. And I remember it was pretty traumatizing being in the hospital so young, and being away from parents and being away from everybody. And I remember it was, my first memory. I remember being in pain and being unable to move and I wanted to look to the left to watch the television that was there, but I couldn't do anything and I couldn't reach out and I couldn't say anything. And it was this very interesting moment of just feeling invisible, I guess, maybe. Then, I was totally fine and I totally recovered and forgot about that. And I got into athletics, and academics and athletics and music have always been kind of my passion projects. And how I process information is through movement. So I was a runner, and then I did very well with running. I set some records, and then so I grew up in Westchester County in New York. Mm-hmm. It's a very kind of competitive atmosphere. You want to push your kids, these are the parents that came out of hardship and they want the best for their kids and they want to push their kids to, go to the top, and I appreciate that. But doesn't mean it was necessarily easy on us as kids growing up. So from there, a lot of athletics and a lot of academics. And I also grew up in an interesting household with my father being involved in local politics. And he was the mayor of my town. It's a volunteer position, but it was more of a calling. And I would attend all of the events with him, just I was an only child and he would just bring his daughter along. And it was really interesting to observe organic leadership at that level. And what that meant was that we ended up, I I was part of picking out the garbage cans for, for the city planning. And like, I would listen into all the board meetings and listen to what people were arguing about. And we would get phone calls at 7 o'clock in the morning that, the garbage truck knocked over somebody's garbage cans, or, like all the little like funny nuances. And then another part of it was that my father was very diligent and took his post was like a station to him. And it was really something he did out of honor and out of calling. And so we went to the wake of every resident who passed away in my town. So I grew up going to wakes and funerals, and it was just something that was very normal to me. It was the way that you showed respect to your elders. And it was also it was a rite of passage to, it was an honor to be in that space and to hold a somber but appropriate moment. And I think I became very comfortable with, death at a very young age because of that. And it was kind of like just another rite of passage, just something we do. And so you kind of add those things up, and in that long perspective, it kind of makes sense why I would find myself now pursuing and comfortable in the field of gerontology, looking into health and wellness and trying to combine passions of things like, fitness and music and movement, with what is the greater meaning of, life and purpose as we all walk toward, the inevitable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a fascinating early journey too. It's amazing, all those parts. I didn't know that about being the daughter of the mayor, but that's pretty cool too.
It was interesting, and that was its own little fishbowl too, and I think it that also informs probably why I have interests in psychology too.
Sure. Kate, take us a little bit, if you would, and just to preface this. So I'm a child of sort of the 70s and early 80s, and I was interested in not at your level, but fitness and bodybuilding, of course, growing up. And the main faces of the day were Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, Corey Everson on the female side. And at the time there was bodybuilding, and then over here was your powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting and stuff like that. When I went to the IFBB website recently, I was really amazed to see there's a wide range of categories now. They have bodybuilding, classic bodybuilding, fitness, body fitness, wellness fitness, physique, and then where you compete in bikini fitness. Could you talk a little bit just about sort of the current lay of the land in the sport of competitive bodybuilding, and then if you could drill down a little bit on sort of bikini fitness and where that sits, because and I encourage everyone listening and watching to go to Kate's website and her Instagram and so forth. You're extremely cut. You're very ripped, but you're not gigantic. You're not a female Arnold Schwarzenegger. But talk a little bit about the space, if you would, just to educate some of us.
I would love to, because it's a space that I love, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding in this space. Okay. So just to back up just a little bit, I got into bodybuilding. But in Westchester County, there's no fast path to the bodybuilding stage. It's not exactly like the choice career that your parents want you to go and do. And I got into bodybuilding after I essentially took my athletics in high school. I played lacrosse in college as well until I got injured. This will loop back around, but I'm 5'2", and generally 10 pounds or more, like above or below 100 pounds. So like, okay. I'm a petite person, right? So playing at a high level of a contact sport was not necessarily what my physique needed. I got injured a lot. I was very tenacious as a defender, but I got thrown. It's just physics, Sure. And so that didn't last. And I was, like many high reaching athletes, I was quite devastated and depressed in college, when I kind of reached that limit of where the athletics go. It's like, okay, I've been trained my whole life to do this. What am I supposed to do with this energy at this point? And so I transitioned into teaching yoga and teaching fitness. And so I tried to turn the competitiveness like within, right, to like, you know, kind of calm that down and try to work on myself instead of trying to be competitive on a team. And ultimately I landed in bodybuilding, and bodybuilding is I highly recommend it. As, you know, there's competing and then there's bodybuilding. And bodybuilding is the pursuit of a physique and of the inner work that's required to build a physique. And it's just like mind building or any other type of pursuit. It's decades long. And it's, you know, we want to develop the muscle and the strength, and it's really the mind muscle connection that you have with any muscle on your body. And the biggest one is your brain. And it's always mindset over everything else. That's what bodybuilding comes down to, is how long can you persevere, like mentally. And your body will go wherever your mind allows you to go. But if your mind says, I'm giving up, then that's the end. And that's what kind of separates the upper echelon athletes who do well in bodybuilding from those who maybe struggle, is you have to push through that mental block, and you have to really find that position of focus and stamina and perseverance. And knowing your why you're doing this is also really important. You know, and so bodybuilding is something that you can do throughout the decades. It's never too late to start. It's never too early to begin. And it can look, you know, a variety of different ways. And as you've explained, the looks of those who have graced, you know, the top stages in competing have totally changed as the decades have gone on. And that reflects largely science, right? Like back in the day, we didn't know necessarily, you know, very much at all about physique science. Physique science is it's totally a science. It's variable by variable. So, you know, when I'm preparing a client or when I'm preparing myself for competition, and just as a general lifestyle, right? Like I know on a daily basis, I know how many grams of every macronutrient that I'm consuming. I know how many, you know, ounces of water that I'm consuming. I know how many repetitions I'm doing. I know how many minutes I'm doing. I personally don't believe in focusing on your output, because your output, as you know, can change. You know, your ability to burn a certain amount of calories, depending on where you are in your hormone cycle, can change. And I don't necessarily have, you know, a screenshot of where I am in my hormone cycle today to know how much I'm going to burn when I go to the gym later and I train back and shoulders. It's not an equal, you know, CECO. It's not calories in, calories out, right? So instead, we work with nutrition, and we work with the variables that we can control to the best of our ability. Now, even within nutrition, think about a salmon, right? Okay, you're like, I'm having salmon. Salmon is extremely variable. Like you can go to the store, and if you trust the store that it can say a piece of salmon has 2.5 grams of fat versus 25 grams of fat. And that's the salmon that has a nutrition label. But when you really think about it, that salmon, there's a salmon swimming around in a river, right? Yep. You're going to go catch that salmon. How likely is that the serving that you're going to have of that salmon going to be accurate to what the USDA claims it to be, you know? So part of it is like finding your own rhythm, and then like choosing foods that have less variance too, if you're really trying to be really specific about physique and trying to articulate, you know, like the lines and being defined, and every physique has different requirements too. So that's just a little bit on the physique science end, right? Where it's actually, I really enjoy it, but there's more to it than just banging around in the gym. And you know, it's I think it's a beautiful science. So then there's, besides bodybuilding, you can take that as extreme or as, you know, mildly as you want to. And then there's competing, and so competing, you prepare for a contest and you do the best that you can to get, you know, into your best shape. And you hope that your shape is the one that the judges go for on that day. And it could be that you bring your very best, and that all the other physiques that show up that day are nothing to do with the one that you brought. You could have brought fullness and curves within your division, and it could be that they're looking for a much harder, leaner look that day. And it's not that the judges have an idea of what they're looking for ahead of time. It's that it's really what's showing up on the stage that day. So it's highly subjective. So to compete in the sport of bodybuilding, you're kind of swallowing the pill of understanding, if I'm going to participate in this game, these are the rules. And I can't get mad about these rules because these rules are subjective. And it's a snapshot, just like blood work. It's just a snapshot of that moment. So it doesn't define you. It doesn't mean anything. It's just, I'm like preparing for this moment and it's going to go this way. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. And all you can control is that you've brought your best. So within the divisions, the sport of bodybuilding has exploded, I think, because of what we just discussed, that more and more athletes are looking for a place to take their physical endeavors after they've been raised to, groomed to push, and then where do they take that? And as you and I, both know, mental health is the mental health of especially young men who are groomed to, do very well in football. They struggle, and they struggle finding a place in the world. And it's a very real phenomenon to, for ex-football players to kind of bounce around for a little while. And some might argue that it's inhumane for society to put so much pressure on them to be raised to be so good at football and have no place for them to go. So physique science and physique in bodybuilding is an interesting possible hobby, I see, for a good mental health exercise. But within the divisions, there are many divisions, and now we have people who are very, very large bodybuilders who go to very extremes, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work on it to compete on any stage. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a lot of work to get down to that level of body fat, and that level of body fat is not made to be maintainable year round.
Got it.
And you enter into that understanding that. So you'll go through generally 12-week cutting cycle, and you'll get as lean as possible to show your striations. And depending on what your body looks like, naturally. So we all have different muscular insertions. We all have different sizes. I'm very petite. I'm a petite female. And I tend to be more hourglass shaped, and I don't put on muscle easily. I'm what they call an ectomorph or an ectomesomorph. So I fit naturally in the bikini category. I'm never going to be in a larger category because my muscle fibers don't grow naturally, and my structure doesn't fit into a larger category. So in the bikini category, right, you to have narrow hips and more narrow shoulders. Like the way that your actual body is shaped is half of the battle. And so if let's say you have a broad rib cage and larger hips, it's going to be really difficult to get a really tiny waist. And they want a tiny waist. Now you can pose. And so posing is its whole different art. And posing is half the battle. And posing, a lot of people don't spend time on the posing. So some of what I do is I teach people how to pose their physiques. And we see how you're drawn, where your insertions are, and what your musculature looks like, and how it falls upon your body. And then we play with the angles of your feet and your hips and your waist and your shoulders, so that you're showing the judges always your best angles, and you're minimizing your flaws, right? So that's an art in and of itself, and that has evolved over the years. And that takes a lot of time also, to just like any dance performance, it's a choreography. And it's work, flexing and holding a pose. It's extremely uncomfortable. And then we women, we do it in 5-inch heels, because those heels help us to accentuate the tie-ins of the hamstrings and the glutes.
Got it.
So that's a little bit of information into that whole niche.
It's fascinating, and as I'm thinking about your whole career now, and when you think about, okay, you played sports, so you had longevity in that, then you came through competitive bodybuilding, longevity in it, and once again there's a time to move on. Now you're teaching others in your practice a variety of different things in terms of fitness, in terms of wellness. And now you take another big step, and we'll say longevity again. And here we go. You are now pursuing a master's degree in gerontology and longevity, but at one of the premier centers in the world. You're there amongst Walter Longo and Caleb Finch, and Judy Campisi comes and lectures. Talk about sort of when you decided to go back to school and take this next major step in the area of longevity. And also, I found it very interesting when I was looking through your educational past. During your undergrad, you studied bacteriophages, which we did a show on that recently, and sort of in the world today, dealing with viruses and everything in the news all the time. Talking about the good viruses is always a really interesting topic. Talk a couple minutes, if you would, about your bacteriophage work and what that was all about. That's always a cool topic as well.
Sure. Thank you. Actually, my bacteriophage work. I guess I would call myself a researcher. It's something I really love to do, is really to get underneath the material and really understand it thoroughly and then apply it, right? I really like the application of the research as well. It was actually in high school that I studied bacteriophages.
No,
and I participated in something called the Intel Independent Science Research Project.
Got it.
I've only met like 2 other people who ever did this, and I don't know, but I must be a masochist because, I don't know why I took this on in addition to everything else, but it was a 3-year independent science research project that you could elect to do. And at the end, you would compete in the Intel competition. And you had to submit, your project and your thesis. And I kind of bounced around a little bit about what I wanted to study. First, I did about a whole year in schizophrenia. And then I took the second 2 years, I finally found my way into more bacteria because, I think I like to solve problems that I have, right? And so that was part of why when I had one of my first health issues with lupus and colitis, and I was not finding any solutions in the conventional, medicine path. I went and tried to find it myself.
Got it.
And the same thing was true with bacteriophages. And what that means is I had acne. I had acne in high school and I hated it. I was like, what are these things on my face? They should not be there. We have to deal with this. And so I wanted to learn more about acne. And I was like, I will figure this out, because I saw that my, over and over and over again, I go to the dermatologist, oh, tetracycline, oh, this cycline, oh, this. They're just throwing antibiotics at me with this. And I'm like, this doesn't seem right. This is not appropriate. And so this was, 2003. And I didn't feel good about taking the antibiotics at all. And I said, there has to be a different way, because there's this thing, people, called antibiotic resistance. It's all around us.
Sure.
And of course, nobody was listening. And I'm this like silly little high schooler that nobody wants, it's not going to take seriously. And I started researching. And as it turns out, the same bacteria that causes acne, it's sebum. It's secreted by the sebaceous gland. The same exact bacteria is only found in the eyes of Swiss cheese. So that was the last time I ate Swiss cheese when I heard about that. Although it's delicious, but it's in the eye of the Swiss cheese. So what I would do is I would swab the eye of the Swiss cheese, put it in a little petri dish, and then I learned about these things called bacteriophages, which are virus-eating bacteria, or bacteria-eating viruses, excuse me. And I had a whole catalog. And the problem was that there was very little research at that time on bacteriophages. So I was basically shooting fish in a barrel, or that's not the right metaphor, but I had to go through a catalog and just order as many strains as I could find, but I didn't have much to go off of. And I found some that like muted the expression of the of growing the sebum, but I didn't find any that solved the problem. But I went through as many as my school would allow me to buy. I went through the budget. But it was really interesting to do that research by myself in the lab. And I remember like many afternoons of just, going in there and being like, and just hoping I would wake up to my Petri dish, with nothing growing. That would be ideal. And so that was, what I did in high school for bacteriophages. In college, I did my undergraduate thesis, since you mentioned I studied politics and economics.
Mm-hmm.
I was really interested in underground economies and why some areas of the economy are, unregulated and informal, and why certain people and intersectionalities are stuck in certain areas, and why we have such structural boundaries, right? I was really fascinated by structural racism and structural inequality in general. And so I noticed that I was living on, I was going to college at a private school. And I noticed a phenomenon that here we are studying this drug war and having all these efforts against this drug war and against the selling of drugs and demonizing of drugs, when the selling of drugs didn't seem to be the problem causing the violence, right? Like these are all basics that we know now. Yep. But at that time, there was very little research that had been done on private drug dealers. So I did an original fieldwork thesis, and I went into the field and had total access, and had many interviews and found many private drug dealers who were operating off of the turf of the private property of the college institution. Right. And so it was my thesis that the protection of having the private property rights allowed them to operate in a competitive economic market and be insulated from the violence that would typically surround the sales of drugs. Sure. And, I got some pushback from my institution for wanting to get into this and perhaps exposing something that should not have been going on.
I can imagine.
But it wasn't necessarily at my college either. I had plenty of friends who were in private schools, and this was, as I said, I was a college student, and part of the ease of access that I had to that population was a big part of my project as well, right? Because I was just, there was the doors were just open to me. I was able to go in. People were proud to talk about what they had been doing. And they had great spreadsheets, and the economy was real, and there were major profits being made. And it was a really fascinating exploration into privilege, I think. So that was the undergraduate thesis.
Okay.
And so that brings me to USC, right? So I did the bodybuilding circuit for, and the health and nutrition coaching, which I believe will carry on, of course. But I wanted more. I wanted to get back into school. And when you really get into bodybuilding, you get into biohacking.
Sure.
And when you get into biohacking, I want to know more. I want to know what's at the base of this information, right? So bringing it all the way back, I wanted a much more solidified and formal approach to information, right? I wanted to get under the biology and the psychology. And also, I think we all want the secrets of the universe. And I have a sneaking suspicion that wisdom truly does lie with our elders, and that we, it makes sense to create a space to share that wisdom instead of what we've kind of been doing and like kind of throwing it away and let it be wasted. And so, you know, ageism is present all the time. And it's, you know, I was recently told like not to talk about ageism because we're not there yet. Like where it's too early to talk about ageism. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. You know, I think it's a very real issue that we all face. And I think part of it is expectations. You know, we're not taught to age. We're not taught to know how to expect what's coming as we age. And there's a lot of psychology, and I think there's a lot of need there, that there's a lot of disappointment or joy in just not discussing it, you know, keeping it under the rug. And so I think it's overwhelming to get involved in gerontology because it's a multidisciplinary area, and you can go so many different directions, right? We can go down the bacteriophage biology route and really examine the impact of sex hormones on menopause, or the impact of sex hormones on longevity and cognition in general, and Alzheimer's. And then you could also take it to preventative medicine. And then we could take it to the social inequities and the social issues that we have mounting with, you know, the obesity pandemic and the Alzheimer's pandemic, and outliving, you know, the pension plan, you know, all of the structural stuff that's, you know, and this massive aging population that we have, you know. And it's kind of a lot. It's kind of like drinking from a fire hose, you know.
It's I you know, one of the things I've been trying to do is bring a lot of different thought leaders together that come, as you were saying, out of that fire hose. Are there specific areas that, and nothing confidential, of course, your projects are confidential, but certain areas that you are specifically hot on? Are you looking at hormones and aging? Are you focusing on age tech? Are you looking at the psychology of ageism? Anything you can talk about? It's not.
I mean, I'm free to talk about any of it. I'm definitely in a lot of the work that I've done in my health and nutrition coaching has been with women, and I've just noticed a trend where I seem to be attracting a lot of clients who have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Okay.
And PCOS seems to be it's not new, but it's more and more prevalent in the population. And that makes sense when you look at the way that our demographics are going with the illnesses that we have right now with obesity and general endocrine dysregulation. And there's so many reasons for having endocrine dysregulation, as you well know. A lot of the guests that you've interviewed have explained a lot of the reasons why, you know, environmentally we're exposed to different things, lifestyle patterns, toxins, our quality of our water, you know, like there's all of that. And then the way that we eat and stress, and the way that we behave, and the way that we sleep. You know, I don't know if EMFs, I mean, there's just a lot of things that contribute to our ability to regulate our own hormones. And then there's a trend that 2/3 of people who get Alzheimer's are women. And there's a massive correlation between sex hormones and cognition. And so especially in a population like postmenopausal women, there is some data to suggest that the presence of estrogen has some impact on cognition long term. And so the Women's Health Initiative came out in 2008, and that said that estrogen was not good for women to be taking that HRT was not good for women to be taking. They have since retracted that, but they didn't send that memo out to physicians. And so there's a lot of misinformation and unpacking right now. And the data is all over the place, right? Like, it's not like, as you know, like moving through the space, this is extremely controversial. So I don't have an MD, I don't have a PhD. I'm not claiming to be an expert in this at all. I just notice trends, and it's something I'm interested in pursuing, the relationship of sex hormones on cognition, and specifically women. And specifically women's health in general is something where I'd like to really, really position my practice. And whether that is on a psychological edge of dealing with the impact of the offshoot of hormones and cognition, or if it's more on a biological edge. Right now, that seems to be a nexus of interest for me.
Very interesting. And there, as you say, that there, but between Alzheimer's and women's health in general, these are major areas. So you have a lot cut out for you, but it's exciting. Talk, if you would. I mean, I know we're shifting here a bit, but if you could take a couple minutes, and then I'll come back to health and longevity. But talk for a couple minutes, because when you're not training and when you're not studying in the lab and so forth, you are a certified crisis counselor for this RAIN organization, which I mentioned at the beginning. Talk for just a couple minutes on how you got involved with this and a little bit about the program.
Sure. So RAIN, and it's also the National Sexual Assault Hotline. So you can go to RAIN, RAINN.org. And it's the largest anti-sexual abuse organization in the country. It's federally funded. It's a fantastic organization. They do a lot of advocacy. Advocacy has always been very important to me, I think, growing up with that. And I did have some personal experiences with sexual abuse growing up. No one in my family. And then I was kind of taught to like ignore that and then like keep going, which, you have to keep going no matter what. So, that's all good and well. But, it was something that I then later experienced also in my 20s. And it was interesting being a fitness professional at the time that I began, because it really still was an all male dominated space.
Okay.
And it was mostly male trainers, and there was a lot of the old boys club going on. And I think it's, when I speak with women from different generations, which I do often, I'm involved in another volunteer social movement with older women. They discuss their reflections and their experiences of, the women's movement and of feminism from the 70s. And then their reactions and reflections to the Me Too movement. And everyone has a Me Too moment that they can share and that they can, speak on. And I had a few moments in my life where I wish I had known about the resources that exist, because I would have maybe acted differently, and maybe not, but I think I would have acted differently had I known that those existed. And so it was important for me for myself to get involved with that, and to kind of offer my services there. And it's also been a really great experience for me to learn the skill set, and to kind of, when we're talking about all this, like, where am I taking this, kind of a thing, it's crisis counseling is definitely, it's not for everyone. It's heavy, but it has really also helped me to form some excellent skill sets, and of course gratitude. Like, sure. It can always be worse, and it can be really, people are like, oh, that must be so depressing. And actually, it's actually not. It's actually kind of the opposite, because I'll get on and it's chat what I do. And so I'll chat with visitors, and it's all anonymous. We're not allowed to know any personal information. If they give us too much personal information, we have to make a report. It's very structured. We receive a lot of training. It's a very well-run and organized program. And it's free. Anyone can access the help that they need. And we have tremendous resources to give visitors. But the resilience that I experience from speaking with young kids is really empowering. And it's something that I think we forget, that, there are these kids that come on who are under the age of 10 and who are in a really horrific situation. But they know to get on the computer. They know to look for help. They know exactly where to go. They know how to use the computer. And they are going to, those are the ones that you don't have to worry about, in a sense, because, of course, that I don't mean it in that way, but they will be okay, because they had the chutzpah to get on there and to know that something was wrong. This was not right. And that I deserve to be in a better situation. And to see that from that generation is really, it's like, okay, there's still hope. There's still goodness in this world. So it's a gift.
Yeah, it's, this theme of resilience, I see that coming back over and over again in sort of different topics. And I think it's really important to bring that up, especially in today, the last year, about resilience, about how we all need to find resilience. Thank you for sharing that story. I think it's very important to mention. It's part of everything you do, and it's very extremely impressive that you spend your time with that as well. Coming back to a later topic, and coming back to you, Kate. You mentioned, what's next. What is next? There's a PhD in plan after your master's. Other things you can talk about. What are we going to see in the coming years from Kate Abate?
I'm continuing to train and bodybuild. I will say I had a setback with the long COVID. I lost a good amount of skeletal muscle with that, and that was a challenge for me, for sure. I had the breathing thing. It was no fun. But I'm doing very well now, and that was it's almost like that was its own gift, right? It's its own little resilience hump of, like, we get knocked down, we have to do it over again. And I'm lucky enough to be in a position of health to be able to do it again. And I have the resources within myself to know how to do that again. So I feel kind of lucky about that. So am I going to compete again? I hope so. But we'll see. As far as the career track, that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is, I think long-term, I really enjoy research, but I really enjoy the application of the research as well, right, in the practice. So I think ultimately, yes, I'll be developing, I'll be taking a path that will likely credential me to practice in a more formalized capacity than that which I'm already doing right now. So excellent. It's, I don't know what hat that will look like, but that's the idea, is to continue to serve and to, provide different possible, more creative solutions to health, I think.
Outstanding. Kate, one final wrap-up question while I have you. Obviously, at the beginning of the show, you mentioned your father and the relationship you had with him as he was running the town, and other important mentors, influencers, anyone at this point in the show you want to shout out to that's been very instrumental in keeping you on this path, inspiring you. Take a couple minutes just to mention, shout out to anyone you want.
Sure. I think there are mentors from afar, and then there are mentors that are kind of close to home. And, like, I'm often inspired by people who have later starts in life, because I kind of feel like I am that a little bit. I didn't go to medical school right after undergrad. And so someone like, you know, I'm sure everyone says this, but someone like Brene Brown, who, you know, got her bachelor's at 29 and ended up, you know, a PhD in social work by like 40. And she's been profound in her space since then, and has made a real impact on, you know, within her shame research and vulnerability research. You know, that she's really brought that to the front, and I really respect that. And she can speak well and she can write well on those subjects, and that's really, she's definitely iconic to me. Then there's someone like Jane Fonda, who is, you know, she also really embodies longevity and health, and fitness. And she definitely stood up for herself and politically too. You know, I actually had Tom Hayden as a professor in like one of the last classes that he ever taught at Scripps College, and that was a real honor to be to get close to him, and he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. And so I was very fortunate while I was doing he took an interest in the thesis project that I was doing, and was very supportive of the work I was doing with college drug dealers, as you might imagine he would be. And so that was really, you know, kismet. And in the space I'm in right now, I've just been, you know, I'm new to gerontology, so I'm still kind of feeling around. But so far, all of my professors have been outstanding. And, you know, it's hard to pick just one, but I'll say, for example, you know, George Shannon is a sociologist, and he went back. He was a professional actor for many years, and he went back to school to get his bachelor's at 55, and he was a PhD by 64. And you know, he's now an esteemed PhD sociologist at USC, doing some excellent research. And I'm really inspired by those who, you know, they want to start a different party. They know that, like, they have the, we talked about resilience, but they have the ability to start a new chapter. And so the women's movement I'm currently involved in right now is called Project Renewment. Okay. And it's run by a woman who I might consider a mentor, two women. They're phenomenal, Helen Dennis and Bernice Bratter. And they are professional women who had long-term careers. And then so society basically said, well, you're kind of supposed to be retired now, you know, when they hit 70. And they said, I'm just getting started. I'm not done, you know? And so they're, at the same time, they're being choosy about how they want to spend their third act. And so their mission is to empower strong professional women to plan their third act, so that it really creates a lifestyle of fulfillment and generativity, but also of fun and maybe things that weren't involved in earlier chapters. And I think that's amazing. And I think that's the best thing about studying aging, is that you can think of aging as a process of decay, or you can think of aging as a process of enlightenment and unfolding an opportunity. And I'll go with that.
A wonderful message. Wonderful message. It's really very impressive and exciting stuff, Kate. And I just, you know, you're doing so much, but I really wish you the best with all of this. I know you're going to be successful with it all. For everybody that's going to be listening on the podcast or watching on our YouTube channel, you've been listening to Kate Abate, IFBB pro bodybuilder and Olympian, nutrition and fitness coach, crisis counselor, master's student in gerontology at USC, Leonard School of Gerontology, bunch of other stuff she's doing. Check out kateabate.com. Check out our Instagram photos if you feel a little bad about yourself. But really, really amazing stuff, Kate. Once again, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show and talk to us. I want to thank you for everything you're doing with your research. And as we say on the show, thank you for helping to create a better tomorrow through what you're doing. It's extremely impressive. And once again, thank you again.
Ira, thank you so much for this opportunity. This felt very self-indulgent, and I really appreciate the support, and I love everything that you're doing. All of the guests you've had have been cherry-picked, and you're really carving a path with your vision and message. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for that.